I'm Alistair Hudson. This is the Law on Investment Entities, Section A, the nature of investment entities. This whole course is about investment law, really, but what we're doing is we're looking at it through the lens of law and history, because I think it's more important, rather than just looking at regulations in a dry as dust way, to think far more three-dimensionally about what are all the rights and obligations that are owed between the various parties to any investment arrangement. Because so much investment now is conducted on the basis of it being done through a trust or a company or some kind of structure of that sort, that it's not simply a bilateral investment between investor and the person that's taking the money. I mean, that's going to be governed by other parts and other courses in relation to securities law, banking and lending and so forth. So a far more interesting and richer way of thinking about how investment law works is to begin with the entities through which we will do this investment. And so what we do is we begin at its roots in Section A with the trust and the company particularly. Now, all of this grows out of a book that I wrote in 2000 called The Law on Investment Entities. It was written just before the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000, and all of this material has now been updated and included in your course textbook, which is The Law of Finance, which I wrote as well. And you'll find that not only is it there in the Law of Finance, the first edition published in 2009, but you'll also be given large amounts of material from the Law on Investment Entities as well. My thesis being that all investment entities that have been generated in this jurisdiction have grown out of principles of contract law and principles of trusts law, really. So let's think about how that works. Just take one example there. The joint stock company. If you look at any history of the development of modern capitalism in this jurisdiction, the joint stock company has a very important role. It has a very important role economically, developmentally, and also legally. Very important for us to think as lawyers. Very easy to get lost when you're looking at finance and to start talking like bankers or to use economists' terms all the time. We also have to think about this in terms of legal concepts. So, the joint stock company, for example, those great Elizabethan expeditions when people sailed off to what were known as the South Seas, what we now think of as being South America, literally a boat would be filled with things that were to be traded, sheepskins, gold, jewellery, whatever it may be. The ship's captain would become a trustee. The ship's captain would hold all of that stock, hence the term joint stock, on trust for all of the people who had contributed that stock to the boat. Okay? All those contributors, the people that wanted to take the profits ultimately, they would be in partnership with one another. So they'd have a contract between them as to how they were going to share out their property rights later on. That contract would also tell the captain what he could and couldn't do, as would the terms of his trusteeship. So what even those Elizabethan traders managed to do was to find a very sophisticated way of merging property and trust law ideas with contract law ideas. How we managed to merge the partnership and the trust to create the joint stock company. What we also did through trust law in these early days was to develop fiduciary concepts, which of course we also find in partnership law, we also find in agency law. We have a person who is subject to fiduciary obligations, that they owe a selfless loyalty to their beneficiaries, that they are to be given powers and obligations to act on behalf of everyone else. And in the earliest company formations, the directors were often treated, well, as acting as though really managers and running the company on behalf of the people who were ultimately its owners who sat in the background. So these fiduciary concepts, avoiding conflicts of interest, acting in the utmost good faith, were very, very important in early investment situations. Because it means the person who is carrying on the investment activity, what we might think of in modern parlance as being the investment scheme manager, owes these kinds of duties to their investors, to act selflessly on their behalf, to limit themselves to the terms of their duties, to go no further than that, not to act in excess of their powers. And it also explains how our investors might take their rights. They may, if we like this structure, have proprietary rights, like a beneficiary under a trust. Or we may prefer them simply to have rights at arm's length, simply to receive cash and not to have any proprietary rights, which might flow from a contract type idea, which is more akin as well to the modern company. So we can follow lots of ideas from contract law, lots of ideas from trust law, into the early joint stock companies and then through into the modern company, post-Salomon and Salomon, where we see the great transformation in that very important decision in 1897 from these companies as being a kind of trust into being a separate, distinct legal person. And that's a moment at which modern capitalism really evolved significantly. And so throughout this course we can see those roots. We can see how the traditional idea of the trust has been modernised by the Trustee Act 2000 to impose ideas like suitability on the trustee. The trustee can't just invest however they want, they have to invest suitably. They have to diversify their investments. They have to take proper advice. All concepts that are really borrowed from modern financial regulation and applied to trusts, unless there's something in the trust instrument to the contrary. So what we see there is trusts giving some very important concepts to the investment transaction, which develops over time with the development of the modern company, which in turn feeds back into trust law and modernises trust law. We look a lot in this course as well as how securities are issued by companies nowadays and what obligations are imposed on companies beyond old-fashioned company law. And what we see now in the modern age is a whole financial regulatory architecture, now through the Financial Conduct Authority, being imposed on those investment relationships. But I think the most important way of understanding the various ways in which investment works in the modern age is to understand what the root legal concepts were and how they've developed over time. It's a much, much richer way of studying this area and enables you to understand the whole of financial practice and the whole of the legal conceptual base here than simply looking at modern regulations and assuming they work in a vacuum. It's a really deep, rich and fascinating area of study. And all the students that have studied on this when I've taught this face-to-face in the University of London have absolutely loved this subject. It's been really, really enjoyable. And I'd love to be able to draw you into our enjoyment of it.